4.2, today we're going to talk about our first conic section, which is a circle. So if you remember from the last class, we had the cone that I held up, and I talked about if conic sections are just sections or cuts of a cone. So the first one we're going to talk about is a circle. So if you take a cone and you just cut it, if you set the cone on a flat surface, cut parallel to that flat surface, what you see is a circle that gets drawn. So in case right here, when you cut through there, there's a circle. So depending on where you cut is the size of the circle. What's the definition of a circle? If you remember in class on the board, we drew a circle. This is probably one of the easiest ones you know. It's a circle is the set of all points equidistant from a fixed point. So the way we did this in class was I taped a string to the whiteboard. And so with the string to the whiteboard, there's my fixed point, and I just put a marker on it, and then you go around, and that makes a circle. This is one of those formulas that if you're ever on a desert island and you need to derive it, you can do that, okay? It's just, all it is the Pythagorean theorem. So a circle is just a byproduct of the Pythagorean theorem. So if I have a circle, something like this, and I've got a point on this circle, we'll call this point X, Y. And this circle has a center. That center is H, K. Okay? All we just need to figure out is what is the equation of this circle. Well, what you can do is you can construct a right triangle. And what's the distance from H? If you look at the bottom of this triangle, that distance is just X minus H. Okay? And if you look at the vertical leg of that triangle, that distance is Y minus K. And if we look at the hypotenuse, we typically call that the radius. If you look at Pythagorean's theorem, you know that the sum of the squares of the two sides equal the square of the hypotenuse. So X minus H squared plus Y minus K squared equal R squared. That is the equation for a circle. So if we take a look at that real quick, and let me slide things over a little bit. There we have equation of the circle. So this is the equation we'll be using. In this section, you'll see a lot of things that are in this bold box. This is a formula you're going to need to know. It will not be given to you on the quiz or test. So standard form of the equation of a circle, X minus H squared plus Y minus K squared, we just derived that, equal R squared. That's the equation of the circle centered at HK with a radius of R. So a few examples. If you look at that equation, X minus H, Y minus K, R, the three things you need are, well, two things. You need the center and the radius. So you need the X coordinate of the center, the Y coordinate of the center, and the radius. So if I can figure out the center and the radius, I can figure out the equation of the circle. What is the radius of this? If I look at, well, it'll start with the center. What is the center? The center is negative 5, 2. And what is the radius of this circle? So if I look at this circle and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, any direction I go, 1, 2, 3, 4, the radius is 4. So the equation of this circle, and what you might want to do in this is, as often as you can in this section, write down the formula. That will keep you from having to memorize these formulas later. So X minus H squared plus Y minus K squared equal R squared. So this is R, H is negative 5, K is 2. So all I have to do is just plug those into the formula. So when I do that, X minus H, X minus negative 5, so this is X plus 5 squared plus Y minus 2 squared equal R squared. So that is 16, okay? So that's the equation of the circle centered at negative 5, 2 with a radius of 4. Give the equation and graph the circle that is centered at the origin with a radius of 3/4. So if my center is there, that means my center is 0, 0. My standard equation is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equal r squared. In this case, they're telling me that r equals 3/4. So the equation of this circle is x minus h. So this is h equals 0, k equals 0, and r equals 3/4. So x minus h, x minus 0. This is just going to be x squared plus y minus 0 squared. That's y squared equal r squared. What's the square of 3/4? That is 9/16. So x squared plus y squared, that is the circle centered at 0, 0 with a radius of 3/4. To graph this, this is 3/4, 3/4, 3/4, and 3/4. I find it's easier to graph a circle if I just think of it in segments like this. Try to make each one sort of curved. And no matter what I try, it's not a perfect circle. It looks more like an oval, but there we get it. So I see the center, and this is my center at 0, 0, and my radius is 3/4. Find the equation that has a diameter with endpoints of 2, 4, and 12, 10. So the point 2, 4 is right here. Okay. So that's 2, 4. So, and 12, 10 is right here. Okay. So these are the endpoints of the diameter of this circle. Okay. So what this circle does is, and that's a bad example. I'm going to have to erase that. I can't let that stand. So the circle does something like this. That's probably not too much better. But what do I need? I need the radius and I need the center. Okay. So to find the center, well, it's the point that is halfway between 2, 4 and 12, 10. We have a formula for the midpoint. Think of the midpoint formula. It's just the average. So you take the two x values and you average them together. How do you average two numbers? You add them and divide by 2. How do you average the y values? Add them together and divide by 2. So the center is going to be 2 plus 12 over 2. Those are my x coordinates. And then add the two y values. So this is what, 14 over 2? That is 7. And 14 over 2, 7. So the center is 7, 7. Okay. And so now I just need to figure out what the radius is. So I know that the center of this circle is 7, 7. So I can do two things. I can use the distance formula or the Pythagorean theorem. Doesn't really matter. If I use the Pythagorean theorem, I'm trying to figure out what is this distance right here. Okay. What's the distance along the x, the bottom of that triangle, from 7 to 12? That's 5. From 7 to 10, that's 3. So I just go figure out what is this value right here. I know that 3 squared plus 5 squared equal r squared. So 9 plus 25 equal r squared. And so that just gives me what, 34 equal r squared. So r is equal to the square root of 34. So the radius is the square root of 34. So my equation is x minus h, so that's 7, that's the center, squared, plus y minus k squared equal, what's the square of square root of 34? That's just 34. And that is the equation of the circle. So a couple formulas I pointed out earlier, midpoint and distance. Now if you didn't draw a triangle here, how do you figure out the distance? The distance formula from 7, 7 to 12, 10. According to the distance formula, that's just the square root of, you take the difference of the x's plus the difference of the y's squared. So that's just the square root of, what, 25 plus 9 equals square root of 34. Same thing. So you can use the distance formula or construct a triangle when you're figuring out this radius from the coordinates. Give the equation and graph the circle that is centered at 4, 4, and it passes through 4, 9. So this is my center at 4, 4. So my center is at 4, 4. And this circle also passes through 4, 9. So it passes through that point. Well, if this is the center and it passes through this point right here, then I know that this has to be my radius. Okay? So that tells me that, what is the radius? The radius goes from 4 to 10, so the radius is 6 in this case. So my center is 4, 4. My radius is 6. As often as I can, write down this formula, x minus 8 squared plus y minus k squared equal r squared. Then this equation is x minus 4 squared plus y minus 4 squared equal the radius squared, which is 36. Graph the particular circle that you see here. Okay, the center of this circle is going to be 3, negative 3. Okay, remember it's x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equal r squared. The radius is going to be the square root of 9, which is 3. So all I need to do is just graph the center. Let's go find 3, negative 3. That's this point right here. If the radius is 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now I have points with which to draw this particular circle. There we go. So the circle centered at 3, negative 3 with a radius of 3. Write the equation and graph the circle centered at negative 1, 2 with a tangent line at x equal negative 5. Negative 1, 2 is right here. Okay, so that is my center. So my center is at negative 1, 2. I have a tangent line at x equal 5. So x equal 5, that's this line right here. So a tangent line is a line, so for example, what a tangent line is, a line is just going to touch the circle at one point, okay? So what that means is when I go draw this circle, it has to go from here, and then it does this, okay? So, but that tells me everything I need to know. I know the center, and then the distance that you see from here to here, that is your radius. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the radius is 6 in this case. That's all I need to know. The center is negative 1, 2. The radius is 6. So the equation, and let's see if I draw this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A better circle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is a better drawing here. And you can see I'm just really not good with these being circles, but I do the best I can. So we know the equation now. So the equation is going to be x plus 1 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 36. Now, this gets into a little bit more algebra and completing the square, which is why we did this. This is a circle. So write this circle in standard form and then graph the circle. So here's what I want to do. I want to gather up my x terms and my y terms. want to move that constant over to the other side of the equation. Now what I need to do, I need to complete the square in both the x variable and the y variable. Okay, so let's just leave a little bit of extra space. So to complete the square, looking at the x variable, I look at the negative 10, all I need to figure out what is half of that number is 5. So you're going to add 5 squared. And then if I look at the y variable, half of 16, what's half of 16? That's 8. So I'm going to add 8 squared to both sides. Now what have I done? On the left side of the equation, it looks like I have added 25 and I have added 64. Okay? So what do I get? On the left side of the equation, this factors into x plus 5 squared plus y minus 8 squared. And then this becomes on the other side, and I think that is just 1. So 65 and 64 plus 25 is 89. 89 minus 88 is 1. So this is our equation. That's our circle in standard form. So what is the center of this circle? This circle is centered at negative 5, 8. And it has a radius of 1. So a circle at negative 5, 8, negative 5, 8, with a radius of 1. Hopefully I can draw this one a little bit better. There we go. Okay. At negative 5, 8, so that's my center is negative 5, 8, and then my radius is 1. So that is it. If I look at the homework you have for 4.2, it should mirror much of what we did here in class. So I give you equations, you give me back the center, radius, and you graph it. So several of those. And then things where you have to complete the square. Okay, so complete the square in both of these, come back in standard form, give me the center, radius, and graph it. And then some of these where I give you descriptions. So I tell you, hey, the center, it passes through a point. I give you circles that are already graphed, and you come back with the equation there, and then some others that, like we did earlier, where I give you different pieces of information, and you have to figure that out. So anyway, take a look at that. Again, this is our first conic section. We cover circles first because it's the most straightforward. The formula is easy, and the derivation and using of the formula is pretty simple, but you want to make sure you keep up and make this solid. This is sort of half the content of the quiz. Quiz will be on circles and ellipses. So this is what we'll do in terms of covering circles.